Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to have a look at some knives and some sharpening things. So let's get straight in. As you probably saw on the last video about essential tools, this is my go-to knife. This is what I use all the time. Lives in my apron pocket. Love it. Great little knife. Also, I don't just use the one knife. I have this knife, which is a clicker knife. As you can see, let's get that in focus. It's that curved blade. It's really quite a thin profile on the blade there. It's great for cutting really detailed patterns. The reason it's called a clicker knife is because back in the day you'd get like a factory where people make shoes or other leather goods. They'd have a room full of people using these knives, cutting out templates. And as they're cutting, you get that click sound as they come off the bench. So they'd be working in silence and all you'd hear is that. So, clicker knives. Very, very useful tools. Also, this here is my little head knife, half moon knife, whatever you want to call it. It has a number of different names, but it's again a very traditional leatherworking tool. You probably won't see one of these outside of a leather crafter's workshop. They're not used for anything else that I'm aware, besides in a kitchen where you do this. One thing I would say when you're using one of these, don't do this. A lot of people get them and think that you cut along the leather like this. If you do that, you're going to run that point straight up into your wrist and you'll be calling a doctor pretty soon. So don't do that. You're supposed to push these knives, get your hand behind it, and you push through the leather, whereas all the other knives you pull. This one you push. And again, you can get really tight, intricate curves and cuts with it. It's really useful. And you can roll gently on that point. Now you can also skive with it, so you can thin your leather out. And you can get these wicked sharp, and they're such a joy to use when you get them just right. So, head knife. I only have a few knives, but this is another one. Again, made by the same company as this. Is the Al Stolman brand. Yeah, just a pretty plain straight knife. I never really got on with this one, so it stays tucked away. If you're wondering what the green is, I took it to a class, and so I marked all the tools that I took with green tape, so no one would nick them. If you're wondering, the strap cutter, we touched on this in the last video. Wonderful for cutting belts and things and straps. Again, it has, if you can see, maybe not, there's a blade just in here. You pull it down the leather, it's a nice clean strap. One thing I would note on these is make sure you tighten this as tight as physically possible. If you just finger tighten it and you start pulling it down your leather, it has a tendency to drift. I found I'd come to the end of a strap and one end would be an inch long and the other an inch wide, and the other end would be 3/4 of an inch or inch and a half, because this assembly had shifted. I've got a vise bolted to my bench, so I will just set it, get it finger tight, pop it in the vise and just give it a twist, and that holds it solid. If you don't have a vise, a pair of pliers. Just get a bit more leverage on it, you'll be fine with that. I guess last but not least, in the knives that I have and use, is this little one. It's a little X-Acto knife. Again, great for little detailed work, and finer leathers, and for templates and things like that. It's just nice to have one. Yeah, pretty cheap. You can get them at a Hobby Lobby, Hobbycraft, all those kind of places. This is a number 11 blade, if I remember rightly. Replaceable, stroppable. Yeah, great. So, if you're wondering, these are the knives that I get all my work done with. Oh, and without forgetting this one, this is my skiver that again we touched on in the last video. Just for skiving down the edges of your leather. So those are the knives. Okay, so everyone who works with knives on a regular basis needs to know how to keep them sharp. Knives like this, really straightforward, we just replace the blade. So I'm going to quickly just show you how to replace this blade. I have a replacement here. I'm going to pull on this switch. It's going to lift up that lock. And we pull it out. And I'm going to pop this one in. Being careful not to hold the edge. Hold near the spine. And we you just give it a jiggle. There you go. There's probably some muck in there. And then we snap this back down. That's locked in. Now, when we're getting rid of these, think about what you're doing with them. Don't just chuck it in the bin, because that's not good for the guys who handle your rubbish or for the environment. So, I have this. No, it's backwards. It says sharps. Right, so this is where I put all my potentially dangerous sharp stuff. It's just a little rawhide pouch with some tape over the top. So I'll just pop that in there, and then when I come to throw that away, those sharp things aren't going to pop out and hurt anyone. So just keeps them tidy and safe. So once you've done this, one of the things I encourage people to do is to strop their blades as often as you remember. If it crosses your mind, just do it. So we'll literally just, let me see, where's a good spot. So we hold it at an angle, and then the same the other way. And the difference that makes to this blade is quite unbelievable. It will make this blade last dramatically longer than you would expect. Every time you think, oh, it's starting to get a little bit dull, starting to get a bit hard to pull, just get it on the strop, a couple of seconds, and it's almost as good as new. Same goes with all the other knives that we talked about. A head knife, again, strop it. Yeah, all the other knives, strop them. This is literally just a block of ash, I believe, with a piece of scrap leather that I just glued onto it. This is the second iteration, or second piece of leather I've had on here. When it gets kind of worn out, you just rip it off, a bit more glue, another piece, trim it to size, and then some Jeweller's Rouge, which just kind of looks like this. You buy it. You can get different grades. Some are more coarse than others, but yeah, a little bit of that on there. Your knives will be nice and sharp for as long as you want them. Your thing, if they do get blunt, you need to know how to sharpen them. So I like to use my sharpening stones. Here I have a 1200 grit, a 4000 grit, and a 6000 grit stone. I prefer to use, these are water stones. There are differences between water stones and wet stones and oil stones. These are Japanese water stones. You've got to let them soak until all the air bubbles stop coming out of them, and then they're good to use. Keep them wet while you're going, and yeah, they put a really nice edge on a knife if you know how to sharpen knives. I'm not going to go into how to sharpen knives today. There are plenty of other people on YouTube who can do it better than me. Watch their videos. So along with these water stones, I have this diamond stone, which has two grits. There's a 400 and a 1000. I don't particularly like this for my knives because I find it cuts quite coarsely. Even though it's a 1000, it feels coarser than that. The cuts that it puts in are very uniform, and unlike these, which are a lot more, I don't know, organic, it feels odd. So what I tend to save this for flattening these stones out. If you use stones like this, over time you'll realise they start to hollow where you use them the most. If you, like, a lot of people will inherit them from their granddad or whatever, and there'll just be a big divot in them. Really, you want them to be nice and flat. This is a solid piece of steel, so it stays flat. So I just work the stones on here until they're flat, and then use the stones. So just my little piece of advice. So yeah, so those are the cutting implements and the sharpening tools I have and I use on a daily basis. I hope that's of use to someone. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks.